Windows in and Out by VMS. It is a kind of a luminous novel about middle age identity and fragile beauty of second chances through alternating inward and outward chapters. The story reveals how every life is a corridor of windows, some we open, some we close, some we fear, and some that save us. Blending the psychological with the emotional, the novel explores the paradox of being seen and unseen, the weight of old griefs, and the surprising tenderness of connection, a haunting, elegant exploration of what it means to heal from others and from ourselves. In that, we have the main character, that is 48-year-old psychologist Dr. Meera knows the architecture of the human mind better than her own, and 52-year-old cardiologist Rajiv repairs thousands of hearts but cannot mend the one beating in his chest. When they meet at the conference in Jaipur, their carefully built lives shift quietly, irrevocably. Set across Bangalore's rain washed evenings and Delhi's winter mornings, the chapter starts. Before that, let's go to the prologue. There are moments in life when a window opens without our consent, not a physical one, those have hinges, frames, predictable boundaries, but the window inside the mind, the one that appears like a breath on glass, sudden, delicate, revealing more than we are ready to see. For Meera, it began on a rain heavy evening in Bangalore, wind pressed against her apartment window with the insistence of an old memory returning uninvited. The glass trembled, holding her reflection on its surface, half in shadow, half lit by the yellow glow of a study lamp. 48 years of life looked back at her, a woman whose grief had refined itself into composure, whose loneliness had reshaped itself into routine. She touched the window pane. It was cold, tender, almost alive. A thought crossed her. If windows could speak, they would tell the truths we hide from ourselves. For Rajiv, the window opened on a winter morning in Delhi. The city was waking slowly, like someone reluctant to leave a dream. From his fourth floor apartment, he watched the fog cling to the branches of the old neem tree as if unwilling to let go, much like he clung to memories of a life that no longer existed. The kettle hissed, the newspaper lay folded, the world was the same, but he no longer was. Widowhood has turned him into a man who lived between hearts, between what once was and what refused to be again. He stood at the window watching the road below blur into white. Fog and grief share a certain kinship. Both reduce the world to silhouettes. Though they lived in different cities, though their worlds never overlapped, a strange symmetry united them. They had both grown accustomed to being seen yet unseen. Both had perfected the art of living, being behind an inner window that no one else could open. But life, persistent, unpredictable life, has a way of aligning windows that believe they will never face each other. It would take a conference in Jaipur, a misplaced file, a conversation that was never meant to happen, and a pair of windows overlooking the same courtyard of Meera and Rajiv to discover something neither had expected. Not companionship, not romance, not solace, but rediscovery of self, of meaning, of the fragile possibility that opening a window can change an entire house. For now, they remain strangers tied up by unseen thread, each standing on either side of their own glass world. But soon, very soon, their windows will begin to open inward and outward, revealing the landscape they had long avoided and the reflection they had long forgotten to see. The first chapter, Windows in Meera, the first window Meera ever remembered was not made of glass. It was a square patch of glass, sky framed by the sloping tiled roof of her grandmother's house in JP Nagar in Bangalore, a widening of the world that existed just above her bedroom mat. As a child, she often lay awake listening to the monsoon, watching the sky appear and disappear through that opening. Some nights it was a quilt of clouds, some nights it was restless blue, some nights it was deep velvet black, and the color of secrets adults refused to share. And the window shaped her like long before she knew what psychology meant. Even now at 48, she often wondered if that early habit of watching the world from a safe, elevated distance had thought to be observe emotions without drowning. In them, her profession was built on windows, people opening theirs and people shutting theirs, and people terrified of what waited behind theirs. But her own, she rarely opened when someone knocked. Bangalore's morning light seeped into her apartment slowly as if it respected her need for quiet. The curtains fluttered with a shy wind that touched the city before the traffic claimed it. She stood before the large living room window, her favorite one, holding a mug of filter coffee. The French windows, her favorite spot, whose aroma felt like a warm hand on her shoulder. Outside, the street was already awake, and milk packets being dropped off with a gentle thud of routine. A school children dragging oversized bags, elderly man in his balcony performing a slow meditative stretches. Inside the room was still, she was still, she sipped, exhaled, and her thoughts settled. Widowhood had not been a sudden loss for her. It was a quiet erosion, a slow unraveling of a marriage that had stopped breathing long before her husband's heart did. The end, when it came, was both a shock and a release, like a window she had leaned against for years, finally swinging open in a sudden gust. Yet the freedom felt incomplete, shaped by guilt, shaped by years of practiced endurance. Her phone vibrated on the table, a reminder, a session with Ananya, her client, 10 a.m. Ananya, young software engineering, struggling with anxiety, often spoke of feeling trapped inside her own mind, unable to open the window she needed, overwhelmed by the ones that opened without warning. Mira saw something of herself in the girl, not the age, not the circumstances, but the heaviness, the inherited silence. She closed her own window gently as if not to disturb it. One day she would open it wide. She told herself this often, but not today. Today, she would listen to someone else's storms, often someone else, a lantern in their darkness, someone else, a vocabulary for their unnamed fears. Irony was not lost on her. She built windows for others while quietly breaking up her own. Before leaving for the clinic, she passed as the window once more. The city had shed its morning mist. The sun drew soft patterns on the tiled rooftops. With its unpredictable skies and gentle stubbornness, reminded her of herself, always changing, always holding back, always waiting for something unnamed. She touched the glass lightly. Sometimes she felt the window understood her better than any human could. It reflected her without judgment, it held her without demanding, it blurred her edges when she needed softness, it offered clarity when she finally asked for it. She whispered a truth she never said aloud. One day I will see myself clearly again. And with that quiet wow, Dr. Mira locked her apartment door and stepped into the world, unaware that something in Delhi, another window, had begun to stir, belonging to a man whose life would soon touch hers like morning light through glass. The next chapter, it is about windows in Rajiv. The first sound Rajiv heard every morning was not the alarm clock. It was the soft, persistent tick of the old wall clock his father had repaired decades ago. A relic hung above his bookshelf, stubbornly keeping time long after everything else in his life had fallen out of rhythm. Tick, pause, tick, heartbeat, a reminder, a sentence without words. Some mornings he hated it, some mornings he needed it. Today he merely listened to it. Till his winter sunlight crept through the curtains with the diffidence of a guest unsure of its welcome. The room carried that familiar early morning chill, the kind that settles into bones and memories with equal ease. He wrapped his palms around a steaming mug of ginger tea, and walked to the window overlooking the neem tree. A fog hung low, blurring the world into gentle shapes, and fog was merciful that way. It softened harsh lines, softened loneliness too. A thin branch tapped lightly against the glass, as if reminding him he was not alone, not and completely. And it was absurd how comforting the smallest things had become in the last 2 years. Widowhood had recalibrated his entire existence. For a man surrounded by family, colleagues, and near constant presence of patience, he has become someone who conversed mostly with the silence. Some days he felt he had aged 20 years overnight. Some days he felt he had not aged at all, only passed. He pressed his forehead gently to the glass. The cold made him inhale sharply. He remembered her Anjali standing at this very spot, adjusting her dupatta, complaining about Delhi's winters, laughing at how he got surprised by the cold. Every year, the window still held the echo of her warmth, but echoes are cruel. They offer sound without a substance. He closed his eyes. He had been a good husband, he told himself, a faithful one, responsible one. But there was guilt he never voiced, the guilt of never having said enough, never having stayed home enough, never having learned how to hold grief when it mattered most. Cardiologists are trained to fix hearts. His own, however, remained a problem he never wrote in any journal. A car honked in the distance, fog shifted, the tree sharpened into focus. He opened the window a few inches, cold air rushed into like truth he had avoided. He inhaled deeply. There was something about winter air. It forced the lungs to expand more than they wished, forced the heart to pay attention. Perhaps that was why Delhi felt more honest to him in winter. He glanced at the clock. Time, always time, running without apology. A new day waited, rounds at the hospital, meeting with the ethics board, and a late consultation with the family terrified of losing of their only son. And he was needed in place where grief wore name tags and moved on stretchers. He shut the window gently. There was comfort in repetition. Rituals kept the hollow spaces in places. And before leaving, Rajesh stood for a moment still, palms pressed to the sill. His life had narrowed into predictable walls, work, tea, silent sleep. There was no room for anything else, no space for disruption or rediscovery. At least that is what he told himself. And something within him stirred whenever he looked outside, as if the world was waiting for him to step out of his own fog. A thought flickered, small, inconvenient, persistent. What if there is still another window? He did not know then what the answer was already moving toward him, and from a city far away, through a life he had yet to meet. He picked up his stethoscope, switched off the light, stepped into the corridor. Delhi's call followed him like an unfinished sentence. The next chapter, it is about the window in the childhood mirrors, and Mira, the window of rain like Mira's childhood unfolded under the soft unhurried rhythm of Bangalore rains, and rains that never arrived in hurry and never truly left. Her grandmother used to say that city did not have monsoons. It had moods. On the western wall of their old, JP Nagar house was a narrow wooden window painted in deep maroon. It did not open fully. Its hinges had rusted long before Mira was born, but it opened just enough to let in a silver of sky, enough to let in a breeze nudge the curtains, enough to make a child believe that world was always slightly larger than it appeared. Every evening, Mira sat under the window as a grandmother told stories, bedtime stories, not of gods or demons, but of feelings. Fear is a room without windows, a G said once. And Hope, young Mira had asked, eyes wide. Hope, her grandmother smiled. Is when a window opens inside you before it opens outside? Mira did not know. I repeat, Hope, her grandmother smiled. Is when a window opens inside you before it opens outside. Mira did not know that those words would become a foundation she built her entire profession on. Her father was a quiet man who read newspapers like Shield's mother moved through the house with clipped efficiency, each footstep a reminder that life must be managed before it can be lived. And Mira, sensitive, observant, always slightly apart, learned early that windows were safer than conversation. She would notice, felt everything. Her first solo decision made at age 10 was to make her study desk under the window. I think better here, she told her confused mother, but the truth was simpler. She breathed better there. Windows taught her introspection long before psychology gave it a name. And Rajiv, the window of precision, Rajiv's childhood was carved out of Delhi's dry summers, the sharp winters, and the unapologetic straightforwardness of the city that never pretended to be gentle. hospital. His home in Karol Bagh had a single large window facing the street, busy world that demanded attention from dawn till dusk. But it wasn't the view outside that shaped him, it was the sound inside. His father's hobby, repair broken clocks, filled the house with dozens of ticking rhythms, some fast, some slow, some erratic, some steady, like disciplined soldiers marching to an invisible commander. Time was never abstract for Rajiv. It lived around him, spoke to him, tested him on Sundays. He perched on a stool beside his father, watching him open the back of an old clock with a surgical delicacy. Everything has a mechanism, his father would say. You fix the mechanism, you fix the sound. Rajiv believed him too deeply, perhaps. And that belief followed him into medicine, shaping him into cardiologist who sought precision not just in diagnosis but in emotion. A person's heartbeat made more sense to him than their words. Still, the window was his anchor. From it, he watched the world blur past with breathtaking urgency. While he remained rooted, steady, and contemplative, his mother often said, some children run into the world. You watch the world run. She meant it lovingly. He heard it as a fate. Like Mira, he too grew up believing that a window was a safer distance from which life could be studied, understood, and what necessary endured. Echoes across cities. Two children, two cities, two windows. One thought introspection, other thought precision. One open to rain, other open to urgency. One reflected emotions, other measured them. And without knowing it, without believing in such curiosities, Mira and Raji were already being shaped for each other, not for romance, not for companionship, but for the kind of connection that requires both the heart and the mind to meet without fear. These windows from childhood would later become the metaphors through which they understand one another. The quiet psychologist who studied human interiors and the disciplined cardiologist who repaired human interiors, their meeting would not be an ancient, it would be the natural convergence of two windows facing the same. The window out Mira and the world beyond glass, the city outside Mira's clinic window was always moving, horns blaring in overlapping impatience, bikes weaving through imaginary lanes, and pedestrians navigating puddles with acrobatic resignation. And her clinic remained a quiet pocket of stillness, a room where the world softened its edges. That contrast defined Mira's life, the turbulence outside, stillness inside, the window in between. The clinic window, her clinic sat on the second floor of a modest building in Indira Nagar, painted a soft cream that felt warmer than her own apartment. Large window behind her desk was its beating heart. Clients often stared at it as if the view, Bangalore's tree-lined roads, uneven rooftops, and wandering clouds could articulate what their voices could not. Mira had seen tears fall against that backdrop. She had seen confessions rise and hover like dust motes. She had watched shoulders unclench, watched fear dissolve, watched a person meet themselves again. Today was no different. And sessions with Ananya at exactly 10, Ananya stepped in slender, nervous, wearing the weary determination for someone who had rigorous arguments with herself at all night. Rough day, Mira asked gently, guiding her to the couch, and rough mind, Ananya corrected, editing a smile that crumbled quickly. My thoughts, they don't stay in one place. It's like windows opening everywhere, and I don't know which ones to shut. Mira nodded. Windows again. The universe had a peculiar sense of metaphor. She leaned forward. What scares you most, Ananya? The windows opening or the possibility of what you will see through them? Ananya blinked, stunned by the simplicity of the question. I repeat the question asked by Dr. Meera. What scares you, Ananya, the most? The windows opening or the possibility of what you will see through them? Ananya blinked, stunned by the simplicity of the question. The opening, she whispered, because then I have to look in. Mira felt something tug at her, an echo of herself she rarely confronted. Through the clinic window, a gust of wind shook the branches outside, perfect moment of synchronicity. Let's look together, Mira said softly. Young woman exhaled as if releasing a breath she had been holding for months. The afternoon walk between sessions, Meera stepped outside for a short walk. Indiranagar was a city within a city, cafes that smelled of fresh pastries, quiet residential lanes, old trees negotiating space with new buildings. She inhaled deeply. The air carried both the scent of rain, soaked leaves, and the metallic tang of traffic, a combination she had grown strangely fond of. Outside, she belonged to the world. Inside, she belonged to herself. Both identities lived side by side, and yet she often felt as if she lived neither fully. As she passed a small handicraft store, a framed art piece caught her eye, a painted window opening outside into a field of sunflowers and light spilling like a promise. She passed. It felt like a message she hadn't asked for. Her fingers hovered over the glass. She didn't buy it, but it stayed with her. Evening reflections back home at dusk lowered itself onto the city. Mira stood before her apartment window, the same place where she examined the shape of her emptiness every night. The sky was streaked with mauve and brushed pink. A neighbor's laughter floated up faintly. Dog barked with the unfiltered emotion only dogs possess. She placed her palm on the glass today, listening to Ananya. She realized something she had long avoided. She had become an expert at helping people look outward because looking inward frightened her still. But windows, real or metaphorical, did not ask for courage, they only asked to be seen. She whispered into the settling night, maybe I will still open, maybe I will start opening slowly. The city lights flickered on as if responding outside the world moved. Inside, she began to shift too quietly, imperceptibly. They like curtains stirred by a hesitant wind. The hospital was made of glass and steel, but what Rajiv carried inside it each day was far heavier. Windows out, Rajiv and the world he holds together. The unspoken fear of families, fragile hope of patience, and the invisible weight of decisions that shape the thin between survival and loss. And most people, hospitals were temporary worlds. Rajiv, they were the geography of his existence. The hospital window, his office on the third floor, overlooked the busy arterial road outside. The window was large, clean, brutally honest, showing every traffic jam, every restless taxi, and every streak of winter haze. Unlike Mira's window, which offered a soft palette of emotion, Rajiv's window mirrored the shape of his teeth. Clear, controlled, functional. Yet at odds, he caught himself staring through it longer than necessary, not searching, not waiting, just breathing. A cardiologist is allowed few luxuries. A private breath was one of them. Morning rounds, he walked through the ICU with his usual composed stride, with white coat, crisp, stethoscope balanced with familiar weight, eyes alert with practiced calm. Nurses greeted him with nods, and residents followed him like planets orbiting a steady sun. At bed, 12 lay a middle aged man recovering from a bypass. How is the pain? Rajiv asked. Manageable, sir. The man replied weakly. His wife, standing beside him, had eyes red for sleeplessness. She looked at Rajiv the way people looked at gods in temple, hopeful, frightened, desperate for miracles. Rajiv never liked that case. He was not a god. He was a man holding a torch in a tunnel. He didn't build. He adjusted the patient's monitor, explained the healing process, offered reassurance grounded in data, not sentiment. As he walked away, his resident whispered, "You handle families better than anyone, sir." Rajiv did not respond. He had learned long ago that compassion without boundaries becomes erosion, and he had eroded enough. Ethics committee meeting at noon, he sat across a long conference table where ethics, medicine, and bureaucracy collided. The topic, the terminal patient whose family demanded one last aggressive intervention. Rajiv read the reports, the scans, and the prognosis. It was clear to him the intervention was futile, the heart was too damaged, and the body was tired. And but hope can be unreasonable, families can be unreasonable, love can be unreasonable. He spoke firmly but gently. We must consider not just survival but dignity. He said, and this window, he tapped the medical report. It closed. We cannot force it open without breaking something essential. Silence followed. The committee finally agreed. As he left the room, he felt a familiar ache, a burden of being the one who said no when others begged for yes. A brief, a escape. During lunch break, he visited the small terrace adjoining the cafeteria. Few people came there, which made it the perfect refuge. Delhi's winter sun was mild, a gold coin diluted in mist. He leaned on the railing, letting the cold air settle into his lungs. Below, life rushed. Above, the sky held its breath. Inside him, something shifted just slightly. He remembered Anjali again, how she would bring him not kachoris on and on cold mornings, and how she used to scold him for skipping meals, and she had stand beside him at windows tracing clouds with her fingers. He closed his eyes. Grief does not leave, he rearranges itself. Evening consultations. His last appointment of the day was a teenage boy with a congenital arrhythmia, and the boy cracked jokes to hide fear. His mother clutched her handbag so tightly the leather creaked. And you will be okay, Rajiv assured him after examining the scans. We have a plan and time. Time, the boy laughed nervously. That's the scary part, sir. Too much or too little, Rajiv smiled faintly. You learn to work with whatever you get. And as they left the mother, asked quietly, how do you stay so calm, doctor? Rajiv looked at his hands. Steady skill, discipline. These hands know the inside of the heart, he said gently, but the mind, that is different organ altogether. She didn't understand, but he did, returning home. When he reached his apartment, fog was beginning to thicken again. He placed his keys on the table, loosened his collar, walked to the window. The same neem tree waited outside, branches heavy with winter stillness. Opened the window, a little cold air entered like a question he could not yet answer. He stood there for a long time outside the city, hid beneath white silence. Inside, his thoughts moved like quiet currents. For the first time in months, he whispered something into cold. Maybe there is more. He didn't know what more meant, not yet, but he felt the faintest stir, and as if some way for a new window was beginning to open. And the next chapter, it is about the rooms we refused to enter. For Mira, the mind was an architect, designing, redesigning, demolishing, constructing, and it was also a sly saboteur. Some memories it framed neatly and hung on the most visible wall. Others it banished on to a storeroom where dust coated. The truth is a thick, forgiving layer. On a quiet Wednesday evening, halfway between dusk and disappointment, she sat in a consultation room staring at a single sentence in a notebook. People avoid the rooms where their truths echo too loudly. I repeat, people avoid the rooms where their truths echo too loudly. Her handwriting looked foreign, as though her mind has written it without asking her heart for permission. The sentence unsettled her. It was too close to home outside Bangalore's early evening. Stirred autos buzzed like impatient bees. Delivery bikes traced hurried arcs through traffic. The sky dimmed into a muted indigo that made the glass buildings seem transparent like souls without curtains. A notification pinged on a phone. Um, a simple message. Are you free to talk? No emojis, no forced familiarities, just 5 minutes waited like a pulse that had begun to stabilize after erratic beats. She hesitated not because she didn't want to respond, but because something inside her shifted uncomfortably, the way a locked door nudges and the wind pushes too hard. Once again, she got the message, Can we talk? By Rajiv. Before she could reply, her last client of the day, an elderly woman named Indra, walked in carrying. Before she could reply, her last client of the day, an elderly woman named Indra, walked in carrying a lifetime of silence. Meera smiled warmly. How are you today, Auntie? Indra adjusted her pallu. I cleaned my storeroom after 20 years, she said, almost scandalized by her own courage. So many things I'd forgotten, a letter from my husband, a toy from my son, a sari I loved once. I was afraid to open the room, but I did. Her voice trembled a little. Why do you avoid certain rooms, Meera? And Mira Sparrow, the universe had a wicked sense of timing because some rooms remind us of who we used to be, she said quietly, and sometimes that is harder than forgetting. Indira nodded, tears resting delicately at the edge of her eyelids, and like hesitant guest, I feel lighter now, as if dust itself was holding me down all these years. And when she felt, Mira stood at the window of her clinic. The world outside moved with a mechanical certainty, but her inner world grew unsettled. Indra had unknowingly touched the very nerve she had avoided for months. Which rooms in Mira's mind remained locked? Which memories sat unvisited, gathering emotional dust? Which thoughts echoed too loudly for her to face? I repeat, which rooms in Mira's mind remained locked? Which memories sat unvisited, gathering emotional dust? Which truths echoed too loudly for her to face? And Rajiv's message stared at her like an open door. She typed slowly, "Yes, I'm free now." Meanwhile, in Delhi, the winter evening carried a stern chill, one that arrived early and the one overstayed its welcome. And Rajiv walked out of the hospital, rubbing his chest absent-mindedly, as though heaviness had become a physical sensation lodged beneath his ribs. He had just finished speaking to a young man whose father passed away on the operation table, and the grief had been sudden, but grief rarely respected schedules. The boy had stood there, refusing to sit, refusing water, refusing to breathe normally, as if a small collapse might have made the loss turn reversible. And Rajiv had placed a hand on his shoulder. "The heart can stop suddenly," he would say, but love does not stop with it. Even as he said it, he felt the hypocrisy. He had spent years denying his own stalled emotions, and he who understood every artery but none of his own yearnings. He who avoided certain memories the way patience avoided truth. He checked his phone. Mira's reply glowed softly. "Yes, I'm free." He exhaled a slow, almost grateful loosening in his chest. He walked to the staff terrace overlooking old Delhi. From here, the city looked like an old beloved book, and frayed at the edges but full of stories that refused to fade. The Jama Masjid glimmered under a wash of golden light. Voices drifted from streets below and verandas calling out, children arguing, mothers scolding someone for running too fast. Life continued, heedless of sorrow. He dialed home. "Hello." Mira's voice was softer than usual, like curtains drawn against harsh sunlight. "Long day," he said. "Long and revealing," she said. "You, long and humbling." And there was a pause, not awkward, just full, like a held breath before confession. Mira finally said, "I've been thinking about locked rooms." Rajiv smiled faintly. "Me too." "And why do we need to avoid them?" "Because opening them means admitting we have left something unattended," he said. She closed her eyes, and unattended things rot or they wait. He said gently, "Nothing, everything rots." No, not everything rots, and something simply wait to be reclaimed. His voice carried a steadiness she hadn't realized she needed. Another pause. This one was different, warmer, expectant, like a window cracking open but not yet wide enough for wind to rush in. "Mira," Rajiv said, choosing his next word with surgical precision, "I don't want to avoid things anymore." Her heart caught, not in panic but recognition. "Neither do I." When their cars entered, both sat in their separate cities, separate rooms, separate lives, and something fundamental had shifted. And for the first time in years, a room inside each of them unlocked, not completely, not dramatically, but enough for a silver of truth to enter, enough for light to touch what had been untouched too long, enough for the story to begin moving toward the window neither had yet dared to approach. When windows learned to listen, the next chapter, 2 days passed. Neither Mira nor Raju had planned it, yet both found themselves standing before the windows in their respective homes, as though pulled by an invisible thread, an instinctive need to look outward while processing the shift happening inward. Bangalore Mira sighed. The morning sun slanted through her window like a gentle intruder, testing the room's boundaries. The light settled on a bookshelf, her half-read journals, and the half-forgotten mug of herbal tea. And finally, on her face, Mira touched the window pane. It was cool despite the weather warming. She whispered, "You hear everything, don't you?" The window, her silent confident. These past lonely years seemed to reflect her question back to her into a quiet shimmer. She remembered nights when she had stood there unable to sleep, watching the window shift through the glass, neighbors closing curtains, children running in corridors, the watchman's torch slicing darkness into the metronome of safety, and this window had witnessed her grief, anger, emptiness, not with witnessing change. Her phone buzzed and Rajiv, morning, strange, but I woke up thinking about our conversation. She typed back, strange, me too, a second message from him. Can I call? Before she could reply, her mother's voice echoed from the kitchen. Mira, are you joining me for breakfast? She hesitated for years. Her mother had become the safe routine she clung to, proof that responsibility still anchored her life. But lately, Mira sensed her mother watching her carefully, as if measuring how ready she was to step into a new chapter. Coming, Mira called out, and then she wrote back to Rajiv, give me 15 minutes. She placed the phone on the table, but her eyes kept returning to it. The window caught her reflection, half lit, half shadowed, symbolic, almost mocking. Which version of herself was she becoming, and which version was she finally letting go? And Delhi, Rajiv sighed, and Rajiv rarely slept on weekends, years of hospital shifts that disciplined his body to wake early regardless of the day. He stood at his living room windows, a mug of hot coffee warming his fingers outside. Delhi's morning stretched like a grey woolen blanket, soft, thick, slightly smothering, and the neighbor's child was flying a kite from the terrace opposite his building. The kite turned against the window, persistent, alive, and Rajiv found himself murmuring, fly higher. The child could not hear him, of course, but the window did. The windows had been his quiet witness too. They had watched him complete difficult surgeries and fall asleep on the couch, stay into emptiness after Anjali passed away. But now the room felt different, as if air circulated more freely, as if grief, having overstayed its welcome, was lifting at last. His phone chimed. Mera, give me 15 minutes. He smiled, the kind of smile he hadn't worn in years, one that reached his eyes. He typed back, I'll be here. And then he placed the phone near the window, letting the muted light fall upon it as if offering his day. The next conversation to the quiet acceptance of glass and sky. And Bangalore breakfast conversation. Mira sat across from her mother, who was slicing fruit with her unnecessary precision. Her mother did not look up when she said, you have been smiling more. Mira froze. Have I? Yes, and you are checking your phone like it owes you. Answer. Mira felt heart rise to her cheeks. Amma. And her mother finally lifted her gaze, soft but piercing. I'm not asking anything, Mira. I'm just only observing. Windows are not the only things that see. They ate quietly for a few minutes. Then her mother said, it's okay to want her companionship again. And the words were gentle, not intrusive, but they hit a place inside Mira she had kept protected even from herself. Amma, I'm not. You don't have to explain, her mother said, placing a comforting hand on hers. Just remember, life did not end when someone leaves us. It only pauses. It waits for us to unpause. Mira swallowed hard. Outside, a soft breeze rattled the window slightly, as if agreeing. Delhi, the call begins, and 15 minutes later, Mira answered Rajiv's call while standing by her window. And good morning, he said. His voice was gentle but steady, like the hum of a familiar raga. And morning, she replied, feeling a strange flutter. What are you looking at? He asked. The window, she said. You, the same? They both laughed softly at the coincidence, or destiny pretending into coincidence. He asked, do you often talk to your window? More than I talk to people, sometimes, she admitted. Same here, he murmured, but maybe we should learn to speak to each other instead. Her heart passed just for a beat. Maybe we should, she whispered. The silence was not heavy, not anymore. It was a beginning, a parallel scene. Samira's fingers tracing the window's edge said, I think I am starting to open a part of myself I had shut for too long. And Rajiv, watching the kite dance higher in the winter sky, replied, I think I am beginning to allow myself to feel something again. Their breaths synchronized across the distance. Bangalore's morning, Delhi's winter, two windows, two healing souls. Time for once wasn't rushing or resisting, it was listening. The window speaks, it's a metaphorical coda. If windows could speak, they would say, humans only come to us when their inner landscapes shift, when they want to see the world or when they want the world to see them. On this day, both windows, hers and his, felt the tremor of change. I repeat, if windows could speak, they speak like this. Humans only come to us when their inner landscape shift. I repeat, humans only come to us when their inner landscapes shift, when they want to see the world or when they want the world to see them. A quiet, hopeful tremor of rediscovery. The next chapter it is about the reflection from inside out. That evening, Mira reached home earlier than usual. Her clinic sessions had been intense. Each patient morning been fragments and emotional landscape. It was as though every person she met unknowingly decoding her inner spirit. As she placed her keys on the table, her gaze drifted almost habitually to the living room window. The sky outside glowed with a final breath of sunset, a burnt orange fading into soft, forgiving lavender. A rare calm washed over her. She stepped closer to the window and leaned her head gently against the cool glass. The contrast, the heat of her skin against the chill transparency felt oddly comforting. It made her aware of two worlds, the warmth of her inner hesitations and the clarity of the world waiting outside. I repeat, the two worlds, warmth of her inner hesitations and the clarity of the world waiting outside. Her phone rang, Rajiv calling. A small smile formed, measured, unhurried, sincere. She answered the call, an intimacy without touch. You sound relaxed, Rajiv said. Mira let out a soft, almost shy laugh. Do I? I'm trying. Trying is good, better than pretending. There it was, that effortless accuracy of his words did not pry, but they reached. They always reached. I'm standing at my window, she said. Me too. She imagined him mentally, perhaps in the same posture she held, leaning against the glass, grounded and suspended all at once. And what are you seeing? He asked. Buildings, lights turning on, people arriving home, ordinary things. And how do they make you feel? Like a good cardiologist, you always circle back to the pulse that matters. She breathed in, alive, connected, a little exposed. Exposed can be good. His voice gentle, means you are not hiding. She hesitated. Maybe I have been hiding for too long. Then let's not hide, he said. Not from ourselves, not from each other. The words were simple, but they slid through the protective layer she had built over years. She didn't respond immediately, but he understood silence the way a seasoned doctor understood breathing patterns. Quietly, he added, Mira, I think our windows brought us here for a reason. Her heart thudded, not fast but deeply. And Delhi, Rajiv's window. On the other end of the line, Rajiv watched his reflection as night settled over old terraces and narrow lanes. The child with the kite had gone. The sky now belonged to early stars, blinking like shy messengers. He saw his own face in the glass, older, more tired, more human. The lines edged by grief looked softer in the dim light. He touched the window with his fingertips. And have been thinking, he said, about what Mira asked, how the heart beat, not because of rhythm alone, but because something inside keeps choosing to continue. A pause. I think I'm learning to choose again. Mira's breath caught Rajiv. She whispered, as though saying his name too loudly might disrupt the moment. Time is having something to talk to me. End of the day, he admitted, not just anyone, someone who listens and understands. Mira felt her throat tighten. I know that feeling more than you think. And their first vulnerable step, he asked with uncharacteristic hesitation, can I tell you something personal, Mira? Of course, I haven't let myself out of the window at night for years. She frowned slightly. Why? Because night reminds me of hospital corridors, waiting rooms. The last night before Anjali passed, he inhaled. But today I'm looking. Mira turned away from a window and sat down, her body reacting before her mind did. Rajiv, that is not a small thing, she said gently. It feels like one, he murmured, but also like everything. There were moments in life, Mira knew, when healing did not arrive as breakthroughs but as a slight shifts. And a breath held longer, a window opened wider, a memory approached with a softer rage. This was one of those moments, parallel confessions. Mira said quietly, I've been afraid too of what, of feeling something real again, because real things break and I don't want to shatter. He remembered with the steadiness of a man who had stitched open hearts but understood fragile ones better. You won't you won't shatter with me, he said. And even if you do, I have spent my life holding broken pieces together. The line went silent. I repeat, you won't shatter with me, he said. And even if you do, I have spent my life holding broken pieces together. And not heavy, not awkward, just sacred. Two cities, two lonely professional, two windows witnessing a confession neither had planned. A moment of shared breathing. Mira, he finally said, can we do something? What? Just breathe together. She closed her eyes. Okay, he inhaled slowly. She matched his rhythm. Their breaths aligned, strangers once, neighbors always, and soul connectors now. It felt like a prayer neither knew how to say aloud. The window's reflection as they breathed together, the reflection in their respective windows shifted subtly, and Mira saw herself not as a not as a widow who survived, but as a woman who deserved. And Rajiv saw himself not as a doctor who lost, but as a man who could love. The windows, for the first time in years, were not framing loneliness; they were framing possibility. The unspoken promise, and Rajiv, she said softly, yes, let's keep talking, not just today, but regularly. And his reply was immediate, steady, sincere. I want that too, Mira, more than you know. For the first time since widowhood wrapped their lives into muted colors, both felt a gentle unfurling of warmth inside. Not romance, not hate, but something fundamental and foundational, like the first crack of light under a long shut door. And the chapter is about the window between presence and absence. The next morning began with a quiet peculiarity. Mira woke before her alarm, and something had not happened in years. It wasn't restlessness, it wasn't dread, it wasn't even familiar jolt of anxiety that accompanied old memories. It was anticipation, a word she hadn't allowed herself to feel. In a long time, she sat up slowly, listening to the domestic orchestration around her. A mother preparing coffee, distant lift opening on some other floor, a neighboring child practicing skills of keyboard, and Bangalore whispered its morning pulse, steady and familiar. But something in Mira's pulse felt new. She walked to her window, drawn as naturally as a tide to shore. The pain was misty from the cool dawn air. She traced a small circle through the fog with her fingers. The view unveiled itself slowly, trees swaying faintly, scooters zipping past, like her urgent thought, the sky shifting from pale to hopeful gold. And then her phone buzzed. Rajiv, a simple message. Are you awake? She smiled without realizing her mother walking past the door with a steel cup, a past noticing, but wisely choosing not to comment. And Mira typed back, yes, you. His reply came instantly. Couldn't sleep much, but it wasn't a bad thing. She breathed in, heart warm. Same here, and Delhi, the shape of a new morning. Rajiv had been awake since 5 a.m., and years of hospital life had trained him to function on broken nights. But today's wakefulness felt different. He wasn't dragging the night's weight, he was carrying its softness. He stood by his window again, his new ritual, watching early Delhi and life unfold. A woman watering plants on the terrace opposite, a shopkeeper pulling up shutters, a stray dog stretching long and slow as though waking from a generous dream. He touched the glass. It didn't feel cold today. It felt receptive, almost compassionable, like a silent witness reach or hold his secrets, but no longer hold his pain. His phone passed. Mira, same here. He exhaled a long, grateful exhale that emptied out the years of internal dust. He typed coffee, she responded, already brewing. He smiled, me too. 2 cups, 2 windows, 2 cities, waking gently around two people, rediscovering their capacity for tenderness. And their morning call, a quiet intimacy, she answered after the first ring. Her hello sounded like light, unforced, natural, warm. You sound good, Rajiv said. I feel different, she admitted. Light, maybe. Light is good, he said. Light means something is shifting. She stepped closer to her window, cup in hand. Steam swirled upward, catching the early sun. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the glass, clearer than the previous day. What are you looking at? He asked. Clouds, she said. Yours, vendors are sitting up their stalls. Some people, some routine, some today it feels gentler. She smiled. Maybe you are gentler today. He laughed softly. Maybe the first exchange of passed without pain. A moment passed, comfortable, trusting. Then Meera said quietly, I thought of Yash today. And Rajiv didn't interrupt. It was a kind of confession that needed space. And I woke up not with pain, she continued, but with gratitude that surprised me. It shouldn't, and he said gently, healing is not betrayal. She closed her eyes, her words soothed, but more than that, they legitimized her experience. What about you? She asked. Anyone, any memory come up? He looked down at his hands that trembled faintly, not from grief but from soft courage. I thought of Anjali, he said, not how she died but how she lived. That hasn't happened in a long time. Mira's throat tightened. That's beautiful, Rajiv. It was, he said, and the painful, but not the kind of pain that stops the heart, more like the pain that teaches it. The silence deepened not as a void but as a shared breath. The unanticipated invitation suddenly Rajiv asked Mira, can I see your window? She blinked. What? Just your view, not you. He clarified quickly, respectful and cautious, only the outside the world you are seeing. She laughed softly, touched by his gentleness. Okay, give me a second. She switched to video but pointed the camera outward towards the trees, the small road, the building opposite, and Rajiv inhaled. It's beautiful, it's ordinary. She said, no, he corrected softly. You are seeing it. That makes it different now. Her cheeks warmed. Your turn, she said. He angled his camera to his window, revealing the terrace across from him, the rising sun, distant bird tracing invisible patterns across the sky. Mira whispered, it's so peaceful, even Delhi has its quiet corners, he joked. But she heard something of his voice, something raw and rediscovered peace, possibility, presentness, not the presentness people fake, but the kind that comes when two wounded souls begin breathing in sync. A pause that felt like a promise. Neither of them spoke for full minute, and just the ambient sounds of two cities, Bangalore, rustling trees, Delhi's distant street murmur filled the call, and it felt like their windows were speaking to each other. Finally, Rajiv said, Meera, I don't know where any of this is going. Neither do I, she whispered, but I want to keep walking toward whether it is right or wrong. And he said softly, not away from it. Her heart steadied. I want that too. Their words were not declarations, but it is acknowledgement, quite truthful, essential. The windows unfolding wisdom. If the windows could have spoken at that moment, they would have said this. You are leaning to open the shutters again, not to forget your past, but to let your present breathe. And in that message, a new chapter of their intertwined lives silently began. The windows might speak like this, and you are leaning to open the shutters again, not to forget your past, but to let your present breathe. The next chapter it is about the distance that measures attachment. The Delhi morning unfolds slowly as though exhausted by Mira's sleepless night. Light staggered through the curtains, weak and unapologetic, pooling around her feet like something unsure of its permission to enter. She had spent the night that familiar battlefield between emotion, logic, her wound, no constructing. She finally gave up. Her cleaning began at 10, but today time felt elastic. It stretched, sagged, resisted her attempts to impose order. Every patient she saw was a reflection of some piece of her own fractured interior. University professor grieving the end of her 21-year marriage said, how do you know which pain is worth holding on to? The teenage girl whispered, what if attachment is just a more polite word for dependent? The elderly man grieving his wife of 5 decades murmured, you don't choose whom you can carry in your chest. These sentences, ordinary therapeutic clinical, stabbed her with the precision of Rajiv's scalpel, and she entered her sessions early. Her mind was too loud to hear anyone else's stories, the unsent message. By evening, she sat on a balcony with a shawl around her shoulder, watching the fog turn the Kudip sky into the watercolor, and her phone lay beside her like a creature that feared to touch. She typed a message, maybe we should slow down. She deleted it, typed again. I'm afraid of running what we already have deleted. Finally, she typed, when are you coming to to Delhi next, and she didn't send that either. Instead, she stayed at the sky gray, heavy, indecisive, much like herself. Bangalore, a parallel restlessness. Meanwhile, in Bangalore, Rajiv sat in this hospital cabin long after the staff had left, and outside the eucalyptus center had drifted in soft currents, but inside him something tightened, refused to settle. He had reviewed angiograms, responded to emergency calls, diagnosed a rare arrhythmia. But one unanswered message he had drafted tormented him. Tell me if I'm imagining this. I can't keep balancing between friendship and something more. He hasn't sent it. And instead, he went home early. Made tea, he forgot to drink, walk around his terrace, watch the Bangalore rain start abruptly, as it always did without warning but with honesty. And if only people loved with the same candor as monsoon rain, he thought. The coincidence that wasn't. At 9:47 p.m., they both picked up their phones. Meera typed, "Are you awake?" At the same moment, Rajiv typed, "Can we talk?" Their message crossed each other like two trains called by the same fate. She saw his tick, he saw hers. Strange warm stillness, something like really flooded both. Rajiv called instantly. Meera didn't even let it ring twice. The call shifted the ground beneath, and Meera, he said, his voice softer than expected, "This distance is not doing something strange to my head." And she exhaled shakily, "To your head or to your heart? And you tell me you are the psychologist." Rajiv, she hesitated. "I don't want to misread this. Why not? What if for once you read it right?" Her heartbeat thundered dangerously, steadily and steady, then fast, then disobedient. A cardiologist would have noticed the arrhythmia, and the psychologist would have named the fear. And she was both the patient and diagnosis tonight, and but she said nothing as she filled the silence. "Meera, I don't want this to be another middle-aged illusion, something we used to fill loneliness and call it love." Honesty startled between them, and with her voice dropped to a whisper. "Is that what you think this is?" "No," he said firmly. "That is what I'm terrified it is not." The room around her blurred. "And you are afraid it's real?" She breathed. "Yes," he answered. "And you are afraid, isn't it?" She closed her eyes. He had exposed her gently, like uncovering a wound that longed to heal but had forgotten. The line that changed everything. Rajiv's next words were so quiet she almost missed them. "Meera, when are you going to stop thinking with your fear?" She sucked in a breath. In therapy, she often asked patients to confront their emotional reflexes, but being asked the same question felt like someone pulling the floor away. "I don't know," she whispered. "I have lived behind fear for so long it feels like self protection, and I have lived behind logic for so long it feels like truth," he replied. "But both of us are wrong." Silence followed, not empty, not fragile, a thick clarity. And finally, Rajiv said, "I'm coming to Delhi next week, and not for work, not for conference, and for you." He breathed, trembled. "I don't know what to do with that," she whispered. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Just meet me." And in that moment, her fear did something miraculous, and it stepped aside. "Yes," she said, "come." And the next chapter, it is about Delhi woke up heavy with winter the next morning, the kind of cloth that made even thoughts the shiver before entering consciousness. Mira stood at a bedroom window, a mug warming her palms, watching her breath leave like clouds on the glass, temporary glass. And the conversation last night hovered over her like a soft electric field. And she had said yes, not to love. She wasn't ready to name that, but to possibility. Possibility was a fragile creature, one wrong move and it could curl into fear, but still she had said yes, and the window fogged up again. And without thinking, she traced a small circle on it with a finger, a gesture a daughter used to make as a child on car windows when bored, and a tiny portal opening inside a larger shield. And that was her life, circles of clarity carved inside old fog. The mind that wants to close, but clarity was demanding in daylight, and the honesty of morning fear re entered like an uninvited tenant. What if Rajiv expects too much? What if she disappoints him? And what if grief had made them both reckless? And even she asked these questions, she knew they came from the mind that wanted to close. If its shutters rattled by the window of new emotion emotions, she gently rebuked herself. How long will you choose safety over life, Meera? But safety was familiar, predictable, comforting. Rajiv was none to those things. And in Bangalore, heart preparing itself, Rajiv stood on his own window that morning, looking at the trimmed hedges of his gated community. The gardener swept fallen jacaranda blossoms into a neat pile, their lilac and brushes straining the pavement. And order, precision, everything in his life was arranged except the one thing that mattered. Now he replayed last night's conversation to Mira's silence and her hesitation, the tremor in her voice when she finally said yes. It moved him more than any dramatic confession. He wasn't looking for declaration, he was looking for wounds that wanted to trust again. He sensed hers, she sensed his. Two people standing behind windows of different shapes, but windows all the same. The inner window opens first. By afternoon, Mira cleared her schedule for the coming week. Her assistant raised an eyebrow. Mira never took spontaneous breaks. Is everything all right, madam? Yes, Mira said, and it surprised her how true it felt. She went home early, opened all the windows in a flat. Cold air swept in, not punishing but exhilarating, and like a slap that was actually a wake up call. Her mind used to compartmentalizing emotions into shelves labeled grief, responsibility, neutrality, now found the entire shelf empty, waiting. She didn't fill it, she let it remain open, an invitation. The external window answers again. That evening, Rajiv sent a message, flight booked, land next Friday at 5:10 p.m. A second later, and I will come straight from the airport, a third, and only if you want that. His caution made her smile. This from the man who cracked open chests for a living to restart hearts. She replied, please come, you are most welcome. Then, after a pause, don't go anywhere else first. It was the most vulnerable sentence she had written in years. On his end, Rajiv read it 3 times, his breath catching a little. The psychological shift, something quite shifted between them that night. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. The windows they had been peeking through, hesitant, cautious, not stood a little wider, not fully open, not yet, but open enough for a breeze to pass through. Open enough for hope, and hope, unlike love or fear, did not demand definitions. It simply arrived, and like life, light through glass. The final scene of the chapter before sleeping, Mira stood again at a bedroom window outside. The streetlight flickered, a tired, aging bulb wrestling with the dust. With its duty, she touched the glass for the first time. She didn't see her reflection. She saw a moment behind it, a future shifting shape, and softly, almost shyly, she whispered, next Friday in Bangalore. The same moment, Raji whispered the same words to his own window, and neither knew the other did, but the windows knew. Windows always know. And the week that refused to pass, the days leading up to Friday, unfolded with the peculiar slowness of time waiting for something important to happen. Time, usually indifferent to human longing, now seemed aware, almost teasing. Each day passed at its edge, stretching itself like a cat luxuriating in its own existence. For Meera, the week became a mirror that had no choice but to look into, and Delhi preparing the mind more than the home. She found herself cleaning corners of the house, and that had never bothered her before, dusting bookshelves and rearranging cushions and folding blankets into neat geometry, not because Rajiv would notice, but because she needed to feel ordered. Emotion had re entered like a guest who did not knock. The least she could do was to straighten the house before it settled. But the true cleaning happened instead. She revisited her views the way a therapist revisits a patient's earliest memories, gently, patiently, without judgment. What if we are moving too fast? What if attachment is only a symptom of loneliness? What if we break each other more than we heal? And but with each question came a softer voice. What if this is the first step toward a new life? What if two broken people can create something whole? And what if love at this age is not a miracle but a ride? Every night she stood at a window, she tried to align these two voices, old and new, the inner and outer. It was like aligning two parallel universities that were finally ready to merge. And Bangalore, the heart practices honestly, and Delhi, the heart practices honesty. Rajiv's week was different. He treated patients, attended morning rounds, performed a complicated angioplasty, but his mind was elsewhere. Every heartbeat he listened to reminded him of his own racing one. His colleagues noticed the shift. You look distracted, Rajiv. Everything okay? Yes, he said, unexpected conviction, and everything is finally okay at home. He opened his wardrobe and paused, and he was on the who thought about what he wore. And the Friday mattered not because Mira cared about clothes, but because he cared about what she would see first. He took out a simple white shirt, clean, unpretentious, honest like him. He spent evenings on his terrace under his faintly perfumed air, and unlike Bangalore's winter, Delhi breezes was warmer, softer, almost approving. He found himself practicing what he wanted to say, not confessions, not declaration, just truth. Mira, I don't want to replace your past, but to walk with you into your future. And he did not know if he had say it, but the sentence felt right. The window correspondence every night of that week they exchanged messages, simple ones, good night Mira, good night Rajiv, and sometimes how was your day better after hearing from you. Nothing dramatic, nothing overflowing, but each message was a stone removed from the wall, guarded their hearts, and the windows both literal and internal and opened wider. The day before Friday, Thursday arrived like the inhale before an important sentence. Mira wore a blue cotton sari to the clinic, one she hadn't worn since her husband's death. She had kept it hidden, associating it with a part of herself she assumed had died. But today, something insisted, wear it, claim yourself again. She realized she was not dressing for Rajiv. She was dressing for the version of herself she was rediscovering. At the clinic, young woman said, Mom, you look gorgeous, brighter today, beautiful. Mira smiled. Maybe I'm Rajiv's last night in Bangalore. In Delhi, he packed lightly two kurtas, white shirt with stethoscope and a book Mira had recommended months ago, but he never started. And he placed it in his bag with quiet reverence. It felt like carrying a piece of a journey. Before sleeping, he stood at his window as if checking everything that night itself approved of tomorrow. The city light shimmered faintly like a constellation rearranging itself. He whispered, Tomorrow. Mira's last night before the meeting in Delhi, Mira did something she hadn't done in years. She opened both sides of her window, inner, outer panels, letting the cold air rush through without restraint. The breeze filled her room like a new beginning. She closed her eyes, feeling the air on her face. If grief had taught her how to survive, hope was now teaching her how to return. She whispered into the wind, Tomorrow. And somewhere between Delhi and Bangalore, wind carried both whispers, preparing the world for two lives about to shift. And the journey between two windows Friday arrived with a quiet authority of inevitability, and it did not rush into place. It settled gently like a truth that had waited long enough. For the first time in years, both Meera and Rajiv woke before dawn, not out of restlessness but anticipation too. So delicate it felt sacred. And Rajiv's flight, her heart boarding at 3:40 a.m. Bangalore airport was unusually calm, and Rajiv stood near the check-in. Delhi's airport was unusually calm. Rajiv stood near the check-in counter, holding a single small bag. Travelers rushed around him, but he felt suspended in a quiet pocket of time. It wasn't the journey that disturbed his nerves; it was the destination. He went through the security with the alert movements of man used to emergencies, but inside he was not a doctor today. He was something far more vulnerable, a man going to meet a woman who had made him remember the pulse beneath his professionalism. Inside the aircraft, he took the window seat. Once the plane rose above the plateau, the city lights scattered like broken amethyst below. And he thought of Mira's window, how she said the Bangalore skyline looked like a tired painting in winter. He imagined her standing there looking out, waiting, his pulse steady, not the nervous kind, but the purposeful kind. And Bangalore wakes with her. Mira woke at 6:10 earlier than her alarm. She didn't spring out of bed. She simply opened her eyes and let the day settle into her. Bangalore winter light is slow, like an old man sitting by the roadside before fully rising. And she walked to her windows, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. Her breath mustard of the glass. She wiped it with her palm, almost instinctively, as if clearing the view of the future. Rajiv's flight would land in the afternoon. She had 7 hours, 7 hours to reorder her thoughts, 7 hours to stop negotiating her fear, and 7 hours to remember that she had chosen this, not to for impulse, not of awakening. She whispered to the window, "Let me not run today." The psychological storm Mira silences old therapist, the one who dissected her emotions with clinical detachment, began to speak. And what if you are misreading this connection? What if it shifts everything but leads nowhere? What if you are projecting? She stood still, then answered herself, "I am alive enough now to risk being wrong." That single sentence softened her entire posture. Not a declaration of courage, but a declaration of return. Rajiv above the clouds. Halfway into the flight, pilot announced turbulence and the plane shook lightly. The woman beside her grasped, but Rajiv remained still, oddly calm. And dislike turbulence had always been emotional. Flights were simple, feelings were not. He placed his hand on the window. The cold glass startled him. He wondered what Mira's window felt like. That morning, warm from a palm to the cold from hesitation, he whispered into the thin air, "I'm coming." And as if he said it, sun broke through a cloud, washing the cabin with an amber that looked almost like blessing. And meanwhile, in Delhi, a ritual she did not expect. Mira spent the morning preparing not the house but herself. She did not choose an elaborate sari. She chose a pale cream one, simple, soft, and the kind that carried no message except sincerity. She placed jasmine in her hand not because he would expect it, but because she wanted to feel like the version of herself she had stopped being. She looked into the mirror, not young, not old, not burdened, not unfinished, just becoming. For the first time in the year, she liked what she was. And the airport arrival, 5:15 p.m. Rajiv flight landed 4 minutes behind schedule. Though he left, it had taken a lifetime more. The moment the aircraft door opened, Bangalore's sharp winter air rushed in, nothing like Delhi's gentle warmth. He welcomed it. He walked through the terminal, not fast, not slow, but with the steady determination of a man approaching a truth. At the exit, the glass sliding doors parted, cold air bit his face. He inhaled deeply, and Bangalore had a different scent, old monuments, ambition, dust, and resilience. He scanned the crowd. He did not expect to see her here, but he did. Mira by the pillow, she stood near a granite pillow, the beautiful cream, light blue sari flowing like a quiet poem around her. Her hair was loosely tied, jasmine rested at the nape of her neck. She wasn't smiling or waving, she was simply looking at him. It was enough to make the entire airport recede. Rajiv stood walking. A small tremor went through him, something between recognition and resurrection. He walked to her slowly as though approaching a fragile truth. When they finally faced each other, neither spoke. Mira's eyes softened, Rajiv's warmed. Their silence did not need translation. The first words Mira spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came?" And Rajiv nodded, eyes never leaving hers. "You called." She inhaled sharply, not at the words, but at their meaning. He didn't mean a phone call, he meant something deeper, something older, something long waited, and then without touching, without announcing, without defining, they began again. The evening between two hearts, a drive from the airport to Mira's home, unfolded like a slow conversation that neither of them needed to speak aloud. The winter had gathered itself into a soft haze. The city looked like it was exhaling its own memories. They sat in the back seat of the cab, not touching, not talking, yet the silence between them was alive, attentive, and almost reverent. A silence that listens rather than hides. The unsaid dialogue. Through the window, the city lights blurred into long strokes of gold, and Mira watched them. But she felt Rajiv watching her. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't performing, she wasn't shrinking, she was simply present. Rajiv finally spoke, his voice low and measured, and "It suits you." She turned toward him. "How? It holds itself together with grace, even in the cold." She smiled. "And Bangalore?" and it holds its warmth even when you say try to stay cold. Their eyes met, brave, searching, vulnerable, an exchange of truth without a decoration. A door opens before a window does. When they reached her building, she passed before unlocking the door. Rajiv, she began cautiously. He placed his hand gently onto the door frame, not touching her but steady the moment. You don't have to explain anything, he said softly when she needed to. I've forgotten how to let someone into my life without feeling like I'm betraying something. He understood instantly. Grief is not a loyalty test, Meera. Her eyes fluttered shut. How did you know that what I feel? Because I have lived it, he said. We both have. She opened her eyes and nodded once. Then she unlocked the door. Inside the home, they waited. Her living room looked simple but alive. Warm lamps, books scattered, a shawl draped over a chair, a space that had been lonely but not lifeless. Rajiv stepped in and instantly felt something shift inside him. This feels like you, he murmured. Mira exhaled. I have not felt like myself in years. He turned to her, a slow understanding dawning. Maybe people return to themselves only when the right person arrives. She looked away too more to meet his gaze, and tea became a confession. She made tea, 2 cups, ginger heavy, and just as he liked. And when she brought them to the sofa, Rajiv smiled. You remembered. I remember many things, she said quietly, most of them unspoken. They sat sipping in silence. But it was Rajiv who broke it in time. I don't know what we are, Meera, or what we are moving toward, but I know I don't want to approach this like a cardiologist analyzing patterns. She raised an eyebrow. How do you want to approach it? He hesitated 2 seconds, three. Then he said, like a man who is ready to feel again. Her breath caught. Rajiv, he continued, voice steady but gentle. I'm not asking you for anything, not a definition, not a promise, just presence. She placed her teacup on the table slowly, deliberately. Presence, she repeated. I can give you that. The window scene that changed everything. After tea, she walked to the large window of her living room, the one through which they had first noticed each other as neighbors. And do you remember, she asked softly, the first time we saw each other through here? And Rajiv joined her, standing close but not touching. Yes, he said, you were rearranging books. I was pretending not to stare, and she laughed a sound so rare it startled her. And he smiled, watching her. She placed her palm on the cold glass. Rajiv lifted his hand and mirrored hers, but on his side, a respectful inch away, like two windows meeting, two truths aligning, he whispered. This is how it started, Mira whispered back. This is how it begins. The room thickened with meaning. Not loud, not it, but the unmistakable gravity of two lives leaning towards each other slowly, honestly, without fear, claiming the last word. A promise without language. Finally, she stepped back and said, stay for dinner. He nodded. I would like that. But what neither of them said, what the room, the air, window, all understand was that this dinner was not an invitation. It was a beginning that required no names, just two people returning to themselves by finding each other. The window between them, the monsoon in Bangalore began its slow retreat, and leaving the city was vulnerable, strangely luminous. The rains had softened Mira in ways she hadn't expected. She found herself waiting for, not for someone, but for the quiet presence that had entered her life through the most unassuming of portals of the window. Her window, their window. The flights between Bangalore and Delhi ceased for now temporarily, they said. Emotionally, she wasn't sure. Work pulled her back, patience demanded her steady mind, and Rajiv had slipped once more into the rhythm of his Delhi clinic. Yet the connection remained threaded through the evening when the world dimmed into the reflection sharpened. On this evening, Mira sat by her window, pen poised above his journal. She wrote slowly, deliberately. Some windows open without effort, others open because two people lean toward the same light. Sometimes the windows see us before we see each other. And Rajiv exhaled. The silence between them expanded, not empty but full. And their windows remained separate, but the spaces between them had become the warmest part of their lives. There no cracks. Delhi was cooling earlier than expected, and Rajiv was himself adjusting the angle and window latch that he adjusted his defenses tighter, on some days open too. He had begun dreaming again, dreams of his late wife,